all, in this video we look into another form of sexual abuse which is called incest, and this is virtually universal among human societies. I begin with the meaning of incest. Incest is culturally prohibited sexual relationships up to and including sexual intercourse between family members. All human cultures have norms regarding who is considered suitable and unsuitable as sexual or marriage partners. Usually, certain close relatives are excluded from being possible partners. Little agreement exists among cultures about which types of blood relationships are permissible partners and which are not. In many cultures, certain types of cousin relations are preferred as sexual and marital partners, whereas others are taboo. You should also know that incest has been there in the past as well. It has been a practice of Egyptian pharaohs to marry their sisters to prevent the royal blood from being contaminated. So this is not something that is happening only recently, but it has its own history. Incest by all means should be avoided, and there has been a lot of hypotheses and reasons as to why we should discourage inbreeding. One thing is that incest often produces children with physical and mental problems. Family members tend to carry recessive genes, and when they mate, it is quite possible that they can bring the recessive genes together, and recessive genes have been cited in the development of many disorders. So that is the reason why incest should be avoided. Another famous hypothesis was actually proposed by Westermarck in 1891. He said that we all have a biologically evolved preference for sexual partners without shared genes, and children reared together regardless of the biological relationship form a sentimental attachment that is by its nature non-erotic. Westermarck's hypothesis seems to have some empirical support as well. One research study by Kendrick and Lewis in 2004 also showed that biologically unrelated children who are raised together in Israeli kibbutzim rarely marry or have affairs with others from the same rearing group when they become adults. Evolutionarily, this makes sense because in most common cultures, children reared together are biologically related, and this seems to be a good enough a reason for why we should discourage inbreeding. It's very common, incest taboo is very common. Actual instance of incest is very difficult to estimate because of the stigma that is attached to it. Not many people will report it. Brother-sister incest is most common of the incest, even though it is rarely reported. Girls living with stepfathers are at a greater risk because here again it doesn't feel like an incestuous relationship. Mother-son incest is relatively rare, and incest offenders do not stop with one child in the family. Some incest fathers who have such incestuous relationship go on to have incestuous relationships with their daughters as they become pubescent. Okay, in this particular slide I have tried to draw the profile of incestuous child molesters. Some incestuous child molesters have pedophilic arousal patterns, but some also show arousal to adult women. And I have also tried to draw the difference between extrafamilial child molesters from incestuous child molesters. Incestuous child molesters, for them most of their targets are girls, and they are more likely to offend one or few children within the family, but pedophilic offenders tend to have more victims than incestuous child molesters. Your book, there is a reference to a particular case of a person whose this particular case came to light in 2007, and this is of a person named Joseph Fritzl. This person had kidnapped his own daughter Elizabeth when she was 18 and imprisoned her in a soundproof compartment that he had built in his own house basement. He forced her to write a note saying that she had joined a cult and that she wanted no further contact with the family. So Elizabeth was made to live in the basement of their own home, and and she lived in there for 24 years. During that particular period of time, he repeatedly forced her to have sex, and because of which Elizabeth bore 7 children. And out of these 7 children, one child died during infancy, and the 3 children were reared in the upstairs family. It was as if Elizabeth had left those children for them, and 3 lived with her in the basement. Eventually, one of the children developed some medical problem, and Elizabeth pleaded with her father so that the child can be taken to the hospital. The hospital authorities thought it was a suspicious case, which they reported, and after investigation, it was found that it was a case of an incest. Quite alarming and very disturbing case that has been reported in your book. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you.